Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Super-Fanta-Fi. This being a show where we're talking about TV shows of the supernatural, fantasy, and science fictional genre, and/or science fictional genre. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the latest episode of Once Upon a Time. So, very interesting episode all around. Well, first of all, let's bring up the fact is that we're kind of working our way through the episode. First thing to bring up is the fact is the sword that ends up ultimately killing Emma turns out to be a very special sword. I mean, I guess that's why it's meant to kind of kill her, because apparently it can hurt the evil queen without hurting Regina, because basically it got to the point that Emma just got so fed up with her, slashed at her and cut her face, but it didn't hurt Regina. Now, I'm guessing it's a sword that kind of is obviously it's a magical sword, but I'm very curious where we kind of get the background on that sword. But whatever it is, it kind of seems like it bypasses whatever's there in front of it and just kind of does whatever. So maybe that's why it's able to straight up kill Emma. Maybe there's like no, it makes you wonder, are there ramifications for killing a savior? I mean, I know it's just kind of, but I feel like it would throw the world off balance if there's no savior to kind of counteract the villain or whatever. Nevertheless, I mean, it was just something I was thinking about. It's just like that just seemed interesting to me that the sword operates like that. It makes you wonder what else it's capable of. That's why I want to know its background. But I'm sure we're going to get its background in the future, maybe. This was a really good episode because it was like, I really like what if episodes, especially Once Upon a Time does them very well. I brought up the whole, I'm sure there's other instances, but it's the one that I always go to. Is the, I've talked about it multiple times in the past. It's the episode where back in, what was it, season 4, the second half of season 4, I think, if I remember that correctly, where essentially the author rewrote history and made the villains heroes and heroes nobodies. That kind of alternate world where the only person that knew the truth was Henry. So it kind of was kind of like that, except it's kind of like a closed off world where essentially Emma was never the savior. This is all thanks to her getting her hands on the lamp and forcing Aladdin to grant that wish. Which I love that whole interaction where it's just kind of like the fact is Regina's having him make drinks for her and everything, and she's just like, oh, we should kind of investigate this new master and servant relationship between us and stuff like that. And Regina comes to confront her, and she's just kind of like, oh, we were about to kind of hit it off or whatever. She's just kind of flirting with Aladdin, kind of touching him and kind of winking at him, and he's just like, ugh, ew, just kind of disgusted. I was like, that I feel a little bad for the evil queen, but at the same time, I mean, I guess arguably it's her trying to move on from Rumpelstiltskin, because interestingly enough, I know I'm jumping all over the place, but it was kind of interesting to hear her perspective on Robin. Because for her, she's like, I loved Robin, don't get me wrong, I was a part of you, just like as much as you love Daniel, because Daniel's the reason why that led to, the evil queen being born. So she knows how to love. She's like, I loved Robin too, but the word is loved, meaning past tense, because of what happened to Robin dying, which kind of worked in her favor because it pushed Regina to kind of separate them. It's like, oh, now she's no longer bound to Regina being kind of the weak person that she is. So now she's able to kind of roam free. So she's very grateful for Robin dying, which is kind of a shame. But she kind of brings it up in the episode where she's kind of like, oh yeah, the whole situation with Emma and Snow White and the Charmings in general. She's like, I did what you've always wanted. You should be thanking me. I split up the Charmings. Now neither one of them they can't never be awake at the same time. Plus I've gotten rid of Emma, which you've wanted for a long time. But the thing is, the evil queen can't comprehend what she can't get behind. The fact is, whether she hasn't outright said it, but this is her family, including the Charmings and Emma. They're part of her family. She cares about them. She even has a hard time explaining that to Emma later on. It's like, yeah, but we're kind of, me and you were kind of friends. It's like, yeah, they are. I'd even go as far as, like her and Snow, Regina and Snow were always kind of like mother and daughter to a certain extent in the past, but but more so than anything, they felt like sisters. And I'm sure that relationship has kind of come back because because Regina's become the person she was before the whole Daniel situation. Because there was a little bit of time when Snow and Regina actually got along, where it wasn't just Regina, like Regina didn't hate Snow the entire time that she knew her, because there was once upon a time that that was literally by accident, that she actually cared about her. So like, her and Snow kind of had that relationship of being like sisters, and it's like, her and Emma are friends, and it's so beautiful to see Regina there. I can't like comment on that enough. That's just so beautiful to see that transition of seeing where her character started. I mean, especially because you're being like you're forced to see it in front of her with the Evil Queen. Interestingly enough, in this episode, I didn't even think about it. There was actually no flashbacks in this episode. Were there any last week's episode? Yeah, there were. Yeah. Yeah, there were flashbacks last episode. I was tripping. I was trying to remember, but there was interestingly no flashbacks this episode. I thought that was kind of interesting. It's funny I brought that up because the same thing happened in Arrow. I know once again crossing streams and whatnot, but it's just kind of interesting to me because this whole because it's like one of the only episodes so far in Arrow that I can remember of any of the past episodes, but definitely of this one where it's because especially this season where it was like there was no flashback, but consider it was a whole crossover event thing, it kind of makes sense. Nevertheless, moving on, but it's just kind of interesting to me, like that the Evil Queen doesn't realize that yet. She doesn't harbor those feelings for them anymore because they're like her family now. But nevertheless, kind of getting to the main thing that was kind of leaving out is the fact is we have Emma in a fake enchanted forest that essentially it's a fake life built around the fact is that wasn't the savior. Now I didn't expect this to happen. I was actually because I got caught basically some of the premise of this episode from previews I've seen during commercial breaks and stuff like that, but it just never sunk in. It's like, oh, that's what this was about. Because to me, I thought what was going to happen was like the fact is like she was all dressed up like that in Storybrooke's woods. I didn't realize she was back in the Enchanted Forest in this fake universe. Basically, in this world, her parents grow older and everything. She grew up a princess and stuff like that. She was never the savior. Basically, it's like everything that happened prior to Storybrooke except an alternate ending where it said instead of the curse being enacted and they go to Storybrooke, the Evil Queen was defeated somehow. Loved multiple things. Like when Regina first gets, she's like, what's up with that dress? The fact is Emma's up here singing and stuff, and she comments on it later on. It's weird to see Emma like that because you see Emma's kind of this very tough lady. Go as far as saying very tomboyish, but she's just like, she's very tough, and seeing her in a frilly dress and just kind of singing, it's weird because it doesn't seem like Emma, the Emma we've come to know. Which it doesn't say like she looks great in a dress or anything like that, but it's weird seeing her being like extra quote unquote ladylike, or just kind of like a stereotypical lady of just being, oh, I'm so frail and dainty type. It doesn't fit her, it's like, yo, like Emma the savior, like go in, bust a couple heads, knock people around, using her powers and magic if she needs to. I mean, that's not 100% Emma's character, but to a certain extent, you get what I mean. It's just interesting. I hope me saying that I didn't offend anyone being like stereotypically ladylike. Nevertheless, what I found very interesting is how she had to like the one who helped her come up with the plan, because essentially the plan was she wasn't going to get to Emma any other way. So what she had to do was she ended up having to convince Emma. It was like, okay, so basically I have to return to being the Evil Queen to kind of draw that out of Emma, which once again kind of interesting because I made a comparison to Arrow earlier, and that's kind of what happened in Arrow's episode last week. The whole like being trapped in a fake life, the life that you've always kind of wanted, essentially. I just thought that was kind of interesting that those two storylines kind of coincide like that. Once again, nevertheless, it was interesting that the person who gave her the idea was Rumpelstiltskin. Because at first she was like, I'm not going to work with you. I don't trust you. She's like, I've learned not to trust you. And he kind of brings up the fact is that, do you ever wonder why Emma became the savior? It's like, there's a reason for it. It's because you're the evil queen. There has to be balance. For every villain, there has to be a hero. For every hero, there has to be a villain. Just universal balance. So that's why Emma was kind of destined to become the savior. It could have been anyone, but it was just kind of a sense of like, I guess she was the next child born. So it's just kind of like the right time. Plus she's a child born out of true love. So it's like, hey, if there was going to be any child that was going to end up being the savior, of course it's going to be Emma. So essentially that meant that, it's almost going as far as saying like it's her fate that it was always going to work out like this. It's kind of interesting. Like she has such a problem. In the past, she always had such a problem with the Charmings, but to a certain extent, she's the reason why she has the problem that she has, rather than she's not living the perfect life that she wanted because of the curse that she enacted. It was supposed to give her everything she wanted. And the reason why it all worked out like that is because she kind of gave birth to Emma in a sense of like giving birth to her as a savior because she became the evil queen. It's like a long line of events that led to anything. Like, I mean, it took certain events. It took Snow White to give birth to the evil queen within Regina, and it later on came to Snow White to give birth to Emma, the savior. But at the same time, too, it does make you wonder how things would work out differently, because if she had never become the evil queen, maybe things would have never. I mean, arguably, it's like there would never been like she would have never gotten her happiness in the sense of like the fact is of Henry. That's what I'm saying. Like if Emma had never become the savior, like Henry would have never. I don't like not necessarily that he would never been born. It's just interesting how things. I mean, as we see, Henry obviously still exists because her and Balefire, or rather Neil, met. And interestingly enough, it seems like from the painting that he became a knight in this alternate universe. But nevertheless, the point I was getting across was just that the fact is that balance thing. So that was kind of interesting. I wonder will we kind of get a little more into that, like because we've gotten very few looks at other heroes. I mean, and saviors. I mean, yeah, saviors and villains. Like the only other ones we know is Jafar and Aladdin, but he's the only other savior, so I'm wondering will we kind of get a little look at other saviors too. Nevertheless, what I find most interesting is the fact that Rumpelstiltskin brings up Storybrooke, and Regina's like, how do you know about Storybrooke? He's like, oh, just, that's for me to know. And it's like, how do you know? That kind of got me thinking, it's like, is he actually Rumpelstiltskin from the real world, and he kind of tagged along in his fake world? I was like, no, and it turns out no, when the way he just kind of disappears later on, so it seems like no, but it's like, how is that? Is that just because he's the dark one, whether it's the real reality or a fake one, he still has massive knowledge? So meaning maybe he knew, well, because he definitely knew about Storybrooke beforehand, so maybe even though it's a fake reality, it's because it's a fake reality based on something real. All of that, all their knowledge and information is the same because he already knew about Storybrooke, a place with no magic beforehand. That's how he suggested the spell for Regina. He selected that place. So maybe that's how he knew about it. That's the only reason I can think about it. Not unless that turns into something later on, but still. But luckily, Regina was able to get to Emma. It was kind of interesting seeing her kind of like play the role of Evil Queen. At first, you can see her peeking out in the hallway when she sees Henry walk in wearing the armor and everything, which I'll admit he looks pretty cool with that armor and everything. You kind of see like a look of accomplishment on her face, like, oh, that's my little boy walking down looking so dashing in some armor. And then she shows up and kind of threatens. She's like, okay. Yeah, summon a hero to take care of this. And then Emma kind of bows down. She's like, oh, mercy. And then she's like, no, Emma, you should try looking for a hero. And and then she's like, exactly where I'll be. Takes her away. And interesting, like, you do see moments where a little bit of Emma from the other world kind of peeks through, where she was like, don't worry, kid, I'll handle this. So it's kind of like her talking to Henry like that made you think, like, oh, a little bit of Emma came out. I was like, okay, she's about to handle this like an Emma. And then Emma shows up and she's like, and she's like, oh, what's that, a weapon to fight me? It's the key to the kingdom. She's like, what? I don't care about the kingdom. I wanted you to kind of get back to you being you. She's like, all right, I guess I have no choice. And she's up sticking her hands into, and ripping out Charming and Snow White's hearts. Ended up crushing them to kind of push Emma to turn back into herself, but it didn't work. But what did work was having Henry step up and be like, you know what? No, I'm going to do it. If Mom won't fight you, I will. She gets ready to throw the sword, and Emma stops him because she knew at that point, like, it kind of clicked in her head because Regina wouldn't fight Henry. She would have stood there and let Henry do his worst because she wasn't going to fight him because she loves him. And that kind of sparked it and kind of returned Emma to normal, which I'm going to pause that right there and kind of go to other stuff and then kind of like bring it all together in the end. Back in the other world, you have like David. He ended up getting the lamp. He ended up making a wish to be like, hey, Evil Queen, I wish for her to get what she deserves. Aladdin casts a spell, but nothing happens. And then he's like, wait, what is that? What happened there? And she's like, you thought it was going to work on me? I already got everything I deserved. I deserved my revenge, and I got it. It's going to work out for my favor. And then, like, you have David kind of grabbing his sword and kind of being pissed and about to attack her, but gets stopped. To me, it's kind of very interesting how, like, we got to see that darker side to David, like him being so like, oh, like out for revenge, out for blood, that he wanted to straight up kill her. Which, I mean, they wanted to destroy her, sure, but it was just like he was so bloodlusty. He even comments on it later. He's like, maybe he was kind of afraid. He's like, the fact is, he wanted to kill the evil queen back in the Enchanted Forest, but it was snow that stopped her. Lucky for them that she did. I mean, granted, yes, you could argue as like, it probably would have saved themselves some trouble, but at the same time, what that would have meant was that Regina wouldn't be alive right now. Yeah, you would have stopped the evil queen, but you would never have Regina right now. And it's like, the Regina and the evil queen are two separate people. I mean, it's like, yeah, Regina gave in to being the evil queen, but that, that's not all there is to her, because as the series progressed, you got to see the Regina side of her heart, not just the evil queen. And you get to see it even more so now that they're split up and everything. But it's just kind of interesting that he referenced that. The fact is that maybe he's a little bit more like his brother, willing to cut down people just out of anger in his heart, which I'm sure that's going to play a role, because we still haven't gone back to the storyline about his dad, finding out that his dad dying wasn't an accident, that someone actually killed his dad. So I'm sure that's going to play a role in that. But we also ended up finding out that Rumpel went looking for his son, couldn't find him anywhere, no matter what spell he used. And also the fact is that he shackled the evil queen with the same brace that he shackled Belle with, and being like, the fact is, I will know where you are. And even, once I find my son, if the Savior hasn't already dealt with you, don't worry, I'll come and finish you off. So, but he goes to Belle and kind of earns her trust back to a certain extent. And it's like, hey, let's look for our son. Something's going up. They end up finding Blue, because apparently Blue was attacked. And lo and behold, the person who took him was Rumpelstiltskin's mom, the Black Fairy, which I don't think I saw that necessarily coming. Maybe I did, I don't know. But the fact of the matter is, the person under the hood knew it was going to be Gideon. Like, it just all clicked. And like, I was watching part of the episode and it just clicked. And I was like, dude, it's totally got to be Gideon. That's why, just because I was like, it made sense, especially the sword being there. It just all fit. I was like, Gideon's going to come back evil somehow, and he's going to come after Emma. I was like, I know how to explain the whole aging thing. But then Rumpel literally explained it this episode, like, yeah, time works differently there. I was like, that's all the explanation I needed. You solved like that riddle. I knew it was going to be something like that, because I know time works differently in different places. Like, for instance, like the Enchanted Forest, like because for them, the entire time they were here in Storybook, thanks to the curse, none of them actually aged. So I kind of figured like that was going to kind of continue to a certain extent, and like wherever he was. But the fact is, I knew they had to be setting his mom up for something, like introducing her. It's like, his dad ended up being Peter Pan, ended up being the main antagonist of season 3, more specifically his first half. Gunnar obviously reappears back in the underworld, but nevertheless, it's like they had to be setting her up for something. But what was her purpose? Is she even still alive? Do you think Gideon actually killed her and took all of her powers, the reason why he's as powerful as he is? Maybe, maybe not. I mean, the whole point is he, without effort, turned the evil queen into a snake and just kind of dealt with her that way, which David kind of took that as an opportunity, as being like, she did get what she deserves. It's kind of like, hey, wishes, they kind of work out their own way. He was kind of expecting immediate justice, I guess, for her to outright be killed, but it's like, no, she's kind of turned into a caged snake, because she is. I forgot what it was. Wasn't it like Snow and Prince Charming in that fake world calling her a snake or something like? Somebody called her a snake or something like that, and it's just kind of like, I guess that was kind of foreshadowing for that too. But I was like, when we took off I was like, freaking Gideon, holy crap! Because Belle had brought up the interest. She was like, what have we done to our son? Because she realizes it's not just what Rumpel did; it's also her, because of the arguing between them, the difference of opinions, not trusting each other, more so not trusting Rumpel. Like, they end up doing the things they did, ended up putting their son further on a darker path. I mean, granted, the reason why things escalated to that point was because of the evil queen. She's the one that dosed her. And now Belle kind of knows. I mean, I think she believes Rumpel when he says that he wasn't the one that dosed her. He wouldn't have. So now she realizes, like, what kind of mistake did she make? I mean, whether it was really a mistake is hard to say, because it's like, that's still about protecting her child. But the fact is, she would have never made that specific drastic move if it weren't for him. And also the fact is that Gideon was in her dream telling her to make this move is what made me very suspicious too. Maybe someone had already maybe she was never actually talking to her. Like, maybe her son has the opportunity like Emma. Like, originally Emma had the destiny of being the greatest good or the greatest evil, and then her parents did what they did and removed that future from her, but it had to go to Maleficent's child. It had to go somewhere. So maybe their son was always meant for having the opportunity to be great good or great evil, and the Black Fairy just kind of warped that in becoming the greatest evil. But I'm curious as to why. What does she do with the children that she takes away, and why take such a special interest in him? I mean, it makes sense because that is her grandson, but still, why? Is it a mean, like, maybe there's more to, like, the history between Rumple and his mom that we haven't gotten to since last, like, we got that little introduction last episode. Maybe they've crossed paths before, this would be an opportunity to learn more about her as well. But it's like, what is Rumple and Belle going to do now that things have kind of escalated to this point, realizing it's like, oh, their son's in front of them. And now, because Belle and them do know about the prophecy too, right? I'm pretty sure, does everyone, I can't remember. Maybe Belle, I know the family knows, but I'm not sure if Belle herself knows. But it's like her son is the one that's going to kill Emma. And it's like, whew, what does that mean? What does that mean for them is what I'm kind of getting at. Is like, what will Rumple do? I mean, because at this point, it's like, because even Rumple himself says, like, his mom is tapped into darkness not even he can reach. Even being the dark one, she's in a level of darkness that even he can't touch. So it's like, he's probably been heavily warped by the darkness, and it's like, I'm gonna have a hard time possibly saving him. I'm just curious to see how, like, that all unfolds. And then kind of tying it up all together is, like, at the end we see Emma and Regina about to leave. They use the beam, they open a portal, and then lo and behold, who shows up? Robin. And Regina just can't leave. She sees Robin and she's just so focused on that. And the portal's closing and Emma's like, oh, Regina, we have to go. I was so sure she was going to jump in because I was like, it makes sense because that's why Regina was like, now this is another way of saying why Regina's not there because she's trapped in the other. It's like, oh, Emma stayed too, because I guess Emma wasn't going to she wasn't going to leave Regina behind in this world by herself. But it's like, holy crap, what does that mean? I mean, I'm sure there's no other way of getting that. I mean, it would involve probably making another deal with Rumpelstiltskin, and it's like, who is to say you can really trust him? I'm sure there's got to be more to that, especially now that they're stuck there. That means they're going to explore that world a little bit more. Maybe we're going to see some more differences in this fake world. I mean, this is also a fake world where Regina killed Snow and Prince Charming, so I'm pretty sure Henry's not going to appreciate that one bit. I mean, it makes you wonder what this all means, what this means with Robin too. Is Regina going to try and bring Robin into the other world? I still think the reason why Regina wasn't there because, off dealing with the evil queen, or maybe she's off dealing with something else. I'm curious. If she is able to get Robin to come back, maybe that's going to play a role with her and Zelena possibly making up. Maybe. I mean, who's to say? Like I said, I bring it up again. I think she'll forgive Zelena. It'll take a long time. It'll take a lot of stuff going down because she eventually forgave Snow because they have the relationship they have now, like sisters. So it only makes sense that she'd eventually forgive her sister. She says she won't, but it'll probably just take Zelena doing the right thing, doing something non-selfish and very selfless of her to eventually win Regina back, I guess. Just so many questions. I guess that's why that's whole Robin grave thing was kind of foreshadowing too, to kind of represent. And it didn't even cross my mind. I'm like, oh, that might be a possibility. It's a very interesting episode. This was the winter finale. I didn't actually catch and see when the next episodes return. I would assume in January because I think that's typically when everything else is coming back, but I could be wrong. I tried looking it up afterwards because I missed that, but I don't, with the list of episodes, it doesn't have that up, so maybe it's not 100% determined yet, or maybe they just hadn't put it up there online yet. I'll probably, if I end up, I'll probably look it up afterwards and might include it in the comments or something like that. The second half of season 5 didn't start until like March, so I don't know. Maybe they're doing something like that too. I get the feeling it's most likely going to be January because I don't know. We'll just have to wait and see. I'm very intrigued to see how this all plays out. So, oh yes, I'm almost totally leaving out the fact is that we have Aladdin and Jasmine going off to Agrabah. Also, Aladdin left something to Henry to give to Emma. Not sure what it is and what that's for, but I'm sure I brought it up before, the whole Doctor Who reference I brought up being like, oh, maybe a whole season 6 type of situation. I'm gonna go ahead and spoil it for anyone that doesn't know. Essentially, that turned into a situation like, oh man, the Doctor's totally gonna die. This is how he dies. That's his fate. And it's like, no, it doesn't. It turns out there was more to that situation than you initially thought. I'm thinking maybe the same thing's gonna happen with Emma, and maybe that thing that Henry ended up getting is key to it. I mean, he's one of the people there during the fight, so. That's a question too. Why would Gideon go after Emma? Why not go after Rumple? Because I feel like you'd have the biggest problem with him. Like I said, I'm pretty sure all of Gideon's mind is warped to hate his parents because it's like, oh, my dad's the dark one, so screw him because he kind of screwed my whole life. But also, I blame Belle because she's the one that kind of left me alone. You should have kept me, you should have protected me, blaming him in that sense. I mean, who's to say what the Black Fairy's been whispering in his ears, but like, why go after Emma? I can only assume because it's like the Black Fairy has her own plans in mind, and maybe it involves taking Emma's powers, or maybe this is actually the reason why Emma was to be the savior, to fight against the greatest evil. Which I'm still arguing. It's like, technically Maleficent's daughter, she represents the other half of Emma's destiny, what Emma's destiny could have been. So it's like, to me, it's like no matter what happens, they're always going to be fated to fight. In my opinion, wasn't it Lilith? Like that, like I said, that has not popped up since like season 4. So I'm curious to see when because they kind of tend to do that. They bring stuff back that you like. Like, there's a lot of stuff they end up bringing back. I'm like, right, that was a thing. That's something from season 1 or season 2. I haven't seen that in so many years. So obviously I'm missing that information. Like I said, so many possibilities. So hooked to find out what happens. But sadly, I'm going to have to wait. So hopefully it won't be too long. So, but really, that's all I want to talk about in this episode. Till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.